Rightio, it is now time to head into the chat room with Nine's Matthew Wolfrey in Sydney and Shelly Horton from 9honey.com.au, also in Sydney. Good afternoon to both of you.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
First up, with the rising cost of living and property, becoming a homeowner is harder than ever. And just to make it even more difficult, when you finally have enough cash and find a home you can afford, investors charge in and pull your home ownership dreams from under your feet, spending tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands more than the initial guide. Shelley, it's a complete mess. It's a real problem.
Well, here's the thing though. I mean, they say it's the Aussie dream to own your own home, but why? I mean, I rent and I love renting. There are so many great options when you rent. I can't afford to live and buy where I can rent. And so I think you just watch a week of A Current Affair and you can at least see 3 neighbours from hell stories, and that will convince you that renting's okay. You can upsize, you can downsize. And you know when they say that rent is dead money? I'm sorry, but paying interest on a massive home loan is also dead money. So why not rent and have a better lifestyle?
But I guess also, I guess it's as long as you're then doing something with other money, as long as you're investing in something else.
Exactly. Put it into your super, you know, do whatever you want, or have great holidays. You know, like I honestly think that we need to be a bit more flexible on what is the Aussie dream, because times are changing and we need to catch up to them.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, do you own a home, or do you feel like there's any hope out there for young Aussies?
I was pretty lucky. I got into the property market about 5 years ago, and it seems to have been just in time because I couldn't afford to buy a home now. And I think if I was looking, I think I'd be like you, Shelley, and just live with renting for the rest of my life. Luckily, I don't own it. The bank owns my house at the moment, and I'm slowly paying them back for it. But yeah, it's like a tiny 1-bedroom apartment was pretty much all I can afford, and it's only room for me and a few shoes, and that's about it in the apartment. And, you know, it's not really the ideal place that I'd like to live. I had to make a bit of sacrifices for that, but that's what I did to get into the property market. And, you know, I'm not living in the dream spot where I was, but you know what? I have a car and I can drive to those places whenever I want. And that's how I kind of see it. Look, my parents are very old school and drove it into me to make sure that you have a house and you put your money where it is and, you know, don't be paying off somebody else's mortgage. And I think that's still what a lot of people aspire to, but it's becoming less and less of a possibility for so many.
Yeah, well, I've got 3 young girls. I can't even imagine in 10, 15 years' time how they're going to manage to get into that property market.
I heard a good idea. Belinda, try this. Instead of sending your girls to private school, spend that money. Well, but for other people, instead of that private school money, put that into a great bank account that's earning interest, and then you can buy them an apartment with the same amount that you would have spent on private school education.
Sounds great.
Or just buy yourself a better place.
Get rid of the kids.
Or, yeah, we can't afford private school because of the girls' ballet fee. So it's just like, no ballet, no private school. Okay, let's move on. And with the Aged Care Royal Commission today handing down its first report, there are calls for aged care providers to allow consumers to post public comments and reviews on their websites for greater transparency. Matt, I guess it's just like you would do if you were looking into a hotel or a restaurant. Do you think that would help make these aged care providers more accountable?
I really think it does. I think any form of putting it out there and making public their ways that they fall short in caring for our elderly is really important. But here's the problem. Lots of old people and elderly don't get to choose which nursing home they go into because often they're forced into a later stage of their life, and they're forced to go to wherever there's a vacant spot because there's such high demand for places. And so if you're not lucky enough to actually choose which aged care home you go into, you can be forced into anywhere. And this is a major problem. So it doesn't matter what reviews are on the website. You could be forced to go there just because that's the only spot available. So we just need to kind of find a way to lift the standards across the board. But what that does, putting public posts out there, is it keeps the accountability that people are watching and that people know what's happening. And I think that's really important. Yeah,
Shelley, what do you think? I mean, do you use review websites like when you're booking a restaurant on holiday? And do you think it would work for the aged care?
I actually think it would. It'd be like ripping the scab off this rotting industry, because it really is that problem. And every time I see a news story about the Royal Commission to it, I actually feel a little bit ill, because these are our parents or our grandparents. These are vulnerable members of society. So if you can actually get some reviews so that you can find out if they are being cared for or if it hasn't been great, it would definitely sway me if I was to keep my parents at home with me a bit longer or to send them off to aged care because I knew it was going to be a good one.
Yeah, as Matt said, as long as you've got a choice, sometimes people don't. Okay, we've got to take a quick break and we'll come back to you both in just a moment. Plenty more to talk about though, including the controversial call for toddlers to be screened for mental illness. The Binge-Watch feature on Netflix leaving some users outraged. And researchers solve a contentious question. So who is funnier, men or women? Let's head straight back into the chat room with Matthew Wilfrey and Shelly Horton. And mental health is getting more attention than ever before, which is a great thing. Now there are calls for toddlers to be screened for mental illness before they start preschool to stop them sliding into anxiety or depression. Matt, do you think it's a good idea, or are toddlers preschool too young?
See, I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with psychologists and mental health myself, so I think it is. I honestly think it is. I think sometimes you can diagnose something before it becomes something, and you're then kind of stuck with that label for the rest of your life. But I think it's also important to be watching out for the signs of mental illness, and I think that's something that we're becoming better at as a society, looking out for those warning signs, those early intervention moments, so that you can then take it and find it. I don't think it should be a mandatory thing that everybody goes and gets assessed by a psychologist so that you can find out whether or not you might potentially get something down the track. It's a bit like reading your fortunes at a fortune teller. You never really know if it's going to happen, and I think a lot of problems will come from that.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, Shelly, the new report also says that taxpayers should spend $975 million a year to hire a well-being leader for every school to spot students with mental health problems and to then send them to psychologists. As a taxpayer, would you be okay with that?
Well, here's the thing. When I first read that, I was really shocked by that number and I thought, hell no. And then I read a bit further and found out that people taking time off work or getting treatment is costing Australians $500 million a day. So
wow.
It actually is a bit of an investment. And unlike Matt, I've had a truckload of therapy. I love it. Bring it on.
So for toddlers then, do you think
I don't think it's toddlers that we're talking about here. Most of it, I mean, I think toddlers seems like a bit of a beat-up headline. It's actually school kids. And you know what? I think it's important to teach school kids what the different emotions feel like, because you know what, you don't necessarily have mental illness if you feel a bit sad. You can have sad days and happy days, but you know what, if you are having extended sad days, and that actually needs to be addressed. And I think having someone there that's keeping an eye on it is nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, and it's just about teaching awareness, and I think it's great that schools these days have the headspace or meditation, and so I think, you know, kids have a better chance now anyway.
Would have saved me a lot of money.
Okay, let's go to something much lighter. And apparently, men are funnier than women.
Duh.
That's according to a study in which men and women were shown a cartoon and asked to write a funny caption. Shelley, I think I need to go straight to you on this one. Take it away.
You know who's not funny? Researchers. People who do studies like this.
Do you know what's really funny? This research.
Yeah, exactly. The way to make something not funny is to tear it apart and try and find the science behind it. I actually hate this sort of study because what I feel like it does is it negates all of our incredible comedians like Tina Fey and Magda Szubanski and Julia Morris and Ellen DeGeneres, and it makes women a little bit afraid to step up and want to be a comedian. I think what we need to do is just not gender this and not make people feel like they couldn't achieve anything. Actually go out and give it a go. I think my girlfriends are particularly funny, so much so sometimes a little bit of wee comes out.
Is that funny, Matt? Funny or weird? But Matt, I mean, as Shelley said, there are lots of very funny women in the world, but definitely more male comedians than women. Do you agree with this study?
I think it's an old-held notion, but I find myself particularly funny, and I think that's the problem. Not many other people do, but I don't think it has anything to do with gender. I think some people are funny, other people aren't. And I think, look, as we go, we're seeing more and more female comedians come up the ranks in the latest years. It's definitely, I think, the tide is turning there. You've got like the Amy Schumers of the world who are coming up, who are really the biggest comedians in the world right now. And there's not a lot of men filling those slots there. So I think the tide is turning, and so therefore men are just trying to fight back.
Yeah. Is it attractive though, Shelley, in men or women? Do you think it to be funny?
So this is part of this research which made me even angrier, is it said that women like funny men, but men don't like funny women. Men like women who laugh at their jokes. So again, it's just getting back to those old-fashioned way of thinking, and I really don't think that we are like that anymore. I think
not
we need
anymore.
you to step forward.
Okay, finally, how many times have you discovered a new TV series that you just can't stop watching, and before you know it, it is 1 a.m. and you really should be in bed? Well, Netflix has come up with a solution which allows subscribers to binge watch their favourite shows. The streaming giant trialling a new feature that speeds up playback by up to 50%. It sparked outrage from big names in the TV and movie industry. Matt, you can understand why they're not happy about it.
Totally. What are you just going to watch more shows and hear them like rather than actually
That's what I
getting
wanna
them
know.
and getting to enjoy them? I think it makes no sense at all. All that would do is make me cram even more into my night, and it would stretch out to 3 a.m. instead of 1 a.m., which pretty much it does most nights anyway.
But can you understand why directors aren't happy? Because they've made this amazing film and now people are speeding through it.
It'd be like taking a Sharpie to a beautiful artwork and just drawing, I thought it'd be better with a smiley face, Mona Lisa.
Shelley, would you use this Netflix feature?
No way. I mean, I have used it on podcasts where you just want to get through, you know, the boring bits.
And so what, you just listen to it a little bit faster so you can still
put it on
understand
1.5 times or 2 times, so it's just a little bit faster. However, my mother was listening to one of my 9 Honey podcasts and rang me and said, "Sweetheart, you got to slow down." And then I realised she had it on double speed.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for joining us. Coming up next is the afternoon news.